My name's Sarah, I'm 32 years old. And tonight, at my dad's birthday dinner, my own mother looked me in the eye and said I couldn't even afford to pay for a single plate. She said it loud enough for the waiter, and my whole family, to hear. But what happened next left them frozen in disbelief. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama, betrayal, and finding courage. I never thought a simple family dinner could feel like walking into a battlefield, but that's exactly what it was. The air inside the little Italian restaurant smelled of garlic and breadsticks, warm and comforting to anyone else, but for me, every step toward that table felt heavier than the last. My dad's birthday should have been a celebration, yet the way my mother's eyes landed on me, sharp and calculating, told me I was about to be tested. "Sarah," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume to catch the attention of nearby diners. "I hope you didn't come expecting to pay. We all know you can't afford this place." Her words landed like a slap across my face. My cheeks burned instantly, and I could feel every pair of eyes at the table shift toward me. My younger brother, Daniel, smirked the way he used to in high school when I tripped over my own shoelaces. My sister, Laura, chuckled softly, tucking her hair behind her ear as if she wanted to appear polite but couldn't resist enjoying the moment. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, lowering his eyes to the menu. He didn't defend me. He never did when Mom started her little digs. The waiter, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, froze mid-step as he set down a basket of bread. His awkward glance flickered from Mom to me, then back to his notepad, as though he wished he could disappear. I wished I could, too. I forced a smile, though my lips trembled. "It's Dad's night," I said, keeping my tone even. "That's all that matters." But inside, the words carved into me like glass. The table filled with chatter as menus opened and drinks were ordered, but I barely heard any of it. My mind raced with old memories. Times when Mom had humiliated me in front of relatives, neighbors, or even complete strangers. Once, when I was 16, she laughed during a cookout, saying, "Don't count on Sarah to cook, she can barely boil water without burning it." Another time, she joked at Christmas that I'd probably re-gift the presents she gave me because I couldn't afford to buy new ones. Those comments had followed me into adulthood like shadows I couldn't shake. The waiter came back to take orders, and Mom wasted no time speaking for me. "She'll just have water," she told him, not even looking in my direction. Something inside me cracked. "No," I said, louder than I intended. My voice shook, but I didn't care. "I'll order for myself." Laura's eyebrows shot up, and Daniel chuckled, muttering, "Here we go again." Dad coughed into his napkin, trying to mask his discomfort. "Let's just keep things calm tonight," he said softly, but Mom wasn't finished. "You're wasting money you don't have," she sneered. "Don't embarrass yourself." The waiter's pen hovered nervously above his pad. His eyes darted between us, unsure of what to do. I could see the sympathy in his face, though he didn't dare show it too openly. I swallowed hard and gave my order. My voice was steady now. If she wanted to humiliate me, I wouldn't let her see me break. The meal began, and while plates clattered in the background and children laughed at nearby tables, I sat in silence, stabbing at my salad while the rest of the family laughed about old stories. Laura recounted her promotion at work, Daniel bragged about his new truck, and Mom beamed at both of them, showering them with the praise I'd spent my whole life chasing but never caught. At one point, Laura leaned over to Mom and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "I'm surprised she even showed up. I mean, what does she really have to celebrate?" They both laughed, their wine glasses clinking together. I gripped my fork tighter, my knuckles turning white. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get up and walk out, to leave them behind once and for all. But then I looked at Dad. His face was tired, older than I remembered, with lines etched deep into his forehead. His birthday was supposed to be about him, not another one of Mom's power plays. So I stayed. The tension only grew thicker when the food arrived. The smell of roasted chicken, marinara sauce, and fresh parmesan filled the air, but I could barely taste a thing. I watched Mom lean toward the waiter, her voice dripping with amusement. "Make sure you bring the check to me," she said. "My daughter here doesn't need the embarrassment of pretending she can pay." The waiter's jaw tightened slightly, though he nodded out of habit. He glanced at me with a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Was it pity, or something else? My stomach churned. I couldn't escape the feeling of being 16 again, standing in front of a room full of people who thought I was a failure. Every laugh, every mocking comment was like another stone thrown at me. And yet, beneath the humiliation, something unexpected stirred in me, a strange calm. Because while Mom thought she was winning this little war, I knew something she didn't. I knew that this time, her words would backfire in a way she could never predict. Still, I said nothing. I sat through dinner, letting her have her spotlight, letting Laura and Daniel bask in their smugness. I focused on Dad, asking about his favorite baseball games, laughing at his small jokes, and reminding myself that this night was about him, not her cruelty. But with every minute that passed, my heart beat faster. The moment was coming. The same staff Mom dismissed so casually would soon show her who I really was. I sat there at the table, holding my fork like it was the only anchor keeping me grounded. My mother's voice echoed in the back of my mind, not just from tonight, but from every stage of my life. It was strange how one dinner could stir up decades of old wounds. As laughter rose from my siblings across the table, my thoughts slipped backward, uninvited, to the earliest time I realized I was different. I must have been about 8 when Mom first started calling me her difficult one. Daniel, just 6 then, had brought home a soccer trophy, and Laura, 4, had stood on a chair reciting her ABCs to the whole family. Everyone clapped and cheered. When it was my turn, I showed them a messy drawing I had worked on for hours, pouring all my little heart into it. Mom glanced at it and sighed. "That's nice, Sarah. But maybe you should try harder at things that actually matter." The sting of those words stayed with me longer than any childhood scrape or bruise. By middle school, I had learned to expect disappointment whenever my name was mentioned. Teachers would say I was quiet, sometimes daydreaming, not pushing hard enough. Mom twisted those comments into proof that I lacked drive. One night at dinner, I remember Dad trying to defend me. "She's creative," he said gently. "She just learns differently. Give her time." Mom scoffed, shaking her head. "The world doesn't reward creativity, John. It rewards results. And Sarah never finishes anything she starts." I had lowered my eyes to my plate of mashed potatoes, pretending not to care. But inside, my chest ached with a heaviness I couldn't explain at that age. High school was worse. By then, Daniel was a star athlete, popular and confident. Laura was effortlessly perfect, always scoring top grades and winning praise from teachers. I, on the other hand, struggled with math and dreaded gym class. My victories were small, passing an exam I thought I'd fail, finishing a short story for English class, but to Mom, they barely counted. Once, after a parent-teacher conference, she came home fuming. I can still hear her words as if she's whispering them at my ear now. "Do you know how embarrassing it is, Sarah, to sit there while other parents brag about scholarships and honors, and I have nothing to say about you?" Her voice cracked with anger, but what hurt most was the shame in her tone. As if I wasn't just disappointing her, I was an embarrassment to her. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow, promising myself I'd do better. But no matter how hard I tried, the goalposts always moved. The pattern followed me into my 20s. While my friends were moving away, starting careers, or finishing college, I was juggling part-time jobs, trying to keep the lights on in my small apartment. I worked as a cashier, a receptionist, even babysat for neighbors, anything that paid just enough to scrape by. Whenever I saw my family, the questions came like clockwork. "So, when are you getting a real job?" Laura would ask, her smile thin and knowing. "Still renting." Daniel would laugh. "You should learn how to manage money, Sarah. You're 30, not 20. Mom didn't even bother asking. She would just sigh when I walked into a room, like my presence alone was a reminder of her lowest expectations. One Christmas still burns in my memory. Everyone was gathered around the tree, exchanging gifts. I had spent weeks hand-making presents, knitted scarves, photo frames, little personal touches I could afford on my budget. Laura opened hers and said, "Oh, how sweet. in that polite tone people use when they don't mean it. Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. Then Mom, holding the scarf I had knitted for her, laughed. "Sarah, you should have just saved your money. We don't need pity gifts." The room went silent for a moment, the kind of silence that screams louder than words. I smiled to hide the pain, but inside I felt like I was shrinking, disappearing right there in front of them. As I sat at the restaurant table now, I realized those years of being branded the disappointment had shaped me more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about money or status. It was about never being seen for who I truly was. I looked at Laura, glowing as she told Mom about her latest work project, and Daniel, leaning back with the swagger of someone who had always been praised. They were everything Mom wanted. And me. I was still the girl who never finished anything she started. My chest tightened, but I straightened in my seat. For the first time in years, I wasn't ashamed of the label. Because I knew something my family didn't. Every hardship, every insult, every moment of being dismissed had built something inside me they couldn't see. But tonight wasn't about proving that just yet. Tonight was about surviving another round of Mom's cruelty without letting her win. She leaned across the table, her voice sharp enough for the waiter nearby to hear. "Sarah, don't look so serious. You should be grateful you even got invited. We didn't want you sitting alone on Dad's birthday." Daniel chuckled, raising his glass. "Yeah, imagine Sarah footing the bill. Half the kitchen would quit out of pity." My father's eyes met mine then, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, anything, to stop it. But he didn't. He just lowered his gaze again, the way he always had. The disappointment wasn't just mine to carry. It was his too, for never finding the courage to stand between me and her. I pressed my palms against my lap under the table, nails digging into my skin, grounding myself. Because for all their mocking, they didn't know the truth. They didn't know the battles I had fought when no one else was watching. They didn't know the nights I stayed awake, counting every dollar, forcing myself to hold on when it would have been easier to give up. And most of all, they didn't know that the girl they had spent her whole life calling a disappointment had already become something far greater than they ever expected. But I wasn't going to tell them that. Not yet. Instead, I smiled, a quiet, steady smile that unsettled Laura and made Daniel frown. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the disappointment anymore. I felt like the storm they didn't see coming. I wish I could tell you that the moment I turned 18, everything suddenly made sense, that life handed me a guidebook, or that my parents finally saw me for more than the girl who never measured up. But real life isn't that neat. What happened instead was quiet, almost invisible. No grand gestures. No applause. Just me, in the corner of my small bedroom, deciding I was done being defined by their disappointment. I remember that night vividly. My mom had slammed the kitchen drawer shut after another argument over me not doing enough to contribute. I had a part-time job bagging groceries, and every penny I earned went straight into paying for school supplies or helping with utilities, but it was never enough for her. She reminded me daily that my cousin Sarah had been accepted into an Ivy League college, while I was just settling for a local community program. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, and thought, fine. If they can't see my worth, I'll prove it in silence. That thought became my fuel. At first, my silent work was simply survival. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, sneak into the living room, and quietly study before my shift at the store. My parents never noticed. If they woke up early, they'd just assume I couldn't sleep. They didn't ask what I was working on, and I didn't bother telling them. Why? Because I knew any attempt to explain would be met with skepticism or, worse, mockery. But as weeks turned into months, I built a rhythm. I studied accounting and management online, often on an old second-hand laptop I'd bought with saved wages. The screen flickered, the fan wheezed, but it was mine. At night, when everyone else was asleep, I'd whisper formulas to myself, double-checking calculations, practicing the kind of skills that no one thought I was capable of mastering. One evening, my dad walked in while I was bent over the laptop. I froze, expecting a sarcastic comment. He just looked at me and asked, "Homework?" I nodded quickly. He grunted, "Don't stay up too late. You'll look tired tomorrow." Then he walked out. That moment hurt more than if he'd insulted me. At least mockery acknowledges effort. His dismissal made me invisible. And yet, I kept going. I started noticing opportunities in the small grocery store where I worked. The manager, Mr. Lopez, was kind but often overwhelmed. Inventory sheets piled up, invoices went unchecked, and scheduling was a nightmare. I watched quietly, and one afternoon, I asked if I could help. He raised an eyebrow. You? You've already got your hands full at the register. Just give me one night, I insisted. I'll show you I can handle it. He reluctantly agreed. I stayed late, long after everyone had gone home, and reorganized 3 months' worth of messy spreadsheets. By the next morning, his office looked transformed. Did you really do all this? He asked, stunned. I shrugged. I just like organizing. That was the first time someone outside my family looked at me with genuine respect. From then on, Mr. Lopez let me handle more tasks. Scheduling shifts, balancing small accounts, calling suppliers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was trust, and I thrived on it. What my family never knew was that those small tasks became my training ground. Each spreadsheet I balanced, each late-night problem I solved, each quiet correction I made to keep the store running, it all shaped me into someone capable. I wasn't just bagging groceries anymore. I was learning how to manage a business without anyone realizing. Of course, the secrecy weighed on me. There were times when I wanted to burst into the kitchen during dinner and shout, "See? I'm not a failure. Someone believes in me." But then I'd picture Mom's smirk, Dad's silence, and my sister's sarcastic eye roll, and I'd swallow the words. Better to let my actions speak later, when they couldn't deny it. Still, moments of doubt crept in. Like the night my paycheck barely covered the electricity bill, and I had to skip dinner so my younger brother could eat. Or the day Sarah posted pictures of her shiny dorm room on social media, with comments like, "So proud of you," from relatives who hadn't even texted me once. I scrolled through those comments while sitting in the back room of the grocery store, eating stale crackers, and thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I'll always just be the disappointment. But then, something shifted. One afternoon, a supplier came in furious about a miscalculated order. Mr. Lopez wasn't there, and the staff panicked. I stepped forward, heart pounding, and calmly offered him coffee while I reviewed the numbers. I spotted the mistake, corrected it, and smoothed over the deal without losing the account. The supplier left satisfied, even patting me on the shoulder with a, "You'll go far, kid." That night, I cried quietly into my pillow, not from sadness, but relief. For the first time, someone outside of my tiny circle had seen me as capable, not as invisible, not as less, but as someone with potential. From then on, I doubled down. My nights grew longer, my mornings earlier. I signed up for free online webinars about business management, learning how to analyze profit margins and streamline operations. I practiced designing mock business plans in my notebook, scribbling numbers in the margins of grocery receipts. My friends teased me for being a workaholic, but they didn't understand. This wasn't about ambition. It was survival. Every decision I made was fueled by one thought: I will not be their disappointment forever. I even began noticing the patterns in my family's behavior with new clarity. Mom always bragged about Sarah's achievements at family gatherings but never once asked me how work was going. Dad spent hours watching TV, barely acknowledging my existence. My sister rolled her eyes when I mentioned studying. It was like I lived in a house full of strangers who refused to see me. But instead of drowning me, that invisibility gave me freedom. If they weren't watching, then I could work without interruption. If they weren't expecting anything from me, then every success I built was mine alone. I learned to love the silence. The quiet hours at the grocery store after closing, when the hum of the refrigerators kept me company as I reviewed invoices. The soft scratching of my pen as I wrote business strategies in the dark, hoping one day they'd be real. The calm rhythm of typing late at night while the rest of the house slept, my fingers flying across the flickering keyboard as if I was racing against time itself. I didn't need their applause anymore. I just needed results. And slowly, results came. Mr. Lopez began introducing me to suppliers as his assistant manager, even though it wasn't official. Staff members started asking me for scheduling help before they went to him. I was the one they turned to when the register glitched or when an angry customer stormed in. Without realizing it, I had become the quiet backbone of the store. But my family, they never knew. To them, I was still just the girl wasting her potential. They never asked why I was so tired, why I sometimes skipped dinner, why I kept notebooks hidden under my bed filled with numbers and charts. That's when I realized something important. The work that changes your life doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it happens in silence, in the shadows, where no one claps for you. And that silence, it was building something far greater than anyone in my family could have imagined. The silence that had once been my ally became the very thing that cracked inside me when Dad's birthday rolled around. It was supposed to be a simple evening. Just family. Just dinner. Just the same predictable rhythm we'd gone through year after year. Mom planning everything, my sister flaunting her achievements, Dad quietly taking it all in while I blended into the background. But this year was different. This year, I carried something they didn't know, the countless nights of unpaid effort, the skills sharpened in shadows, the quiet confidence that had started to take root inside me. Still, I hadn't planned to reveal anything. Not yet. I thought I could endure one more evening of silence. Until Mom opened her mouth. We had just walked into the restaurant. The place buzzed with low chatter, silverware clinking softly, warm lights spilling across polished wooden tables. I had chosen to wear my one nice dress, the one I'd bought on sale and saved for special occasions. It wasn't flashy, but it made me feel steady, like I belonged in spaces bigger than the ones they thought I deserved. The hostess smiled politely. "Welcome. Do you have a reservation?" I was about to step forward, but Mom's voice cut sharp and clear. "She doesn't need to worry about that. My daughter here can't even afford her own dinner, much less a reservation." Laughter followed. From her. From my sister. Even Dad smirked faintly, like he'd heard a tired joke but didn't care enough to defend me. I froze. The words stung, hot and humiliating. Other diners glanced our way. My cheeks burned as though every eye in the room was measuring me against her cutting remark. And that's when the hostess's face changed. Recognition flickered across her eyes, followed by a sudden warmth. "Oh, Miss Parker," she said brightly. "We've been expecting you. Right this way." The air shifted instantly. My mother's laughter caught in her throat. My sister blinked. Dad's smirk vanished. But I stayed silent, following the hostess through the dining room, the steady click of my shoes against the floor echoing louder than their whispers behind me. We were led to a large table near the center of the restaurant. White linen draped perfectly, crystal glasses glimmering beneath soft golden lights. As we sat, staff moved quickly, attentive, professional, but their eyes kept flicking to me with subtle nods of respect. Mom leaned toward me, her voice low and sharp. "What was that about?" I sipped from my water glass, my hand steady though my heart raced. "Maybe you'll find out." The first course arrived. Steaming bowls of soup placed with precision, baskets of warm bread. My sister tried to restart the usual dinner chatter, filling the silence with stories about her work. Dad nodded occasionally, offering mild comments. Mom prodded at her food, her eyes darting toward me every few minutes, suspicion rising like steam from her plate. And then the first spark caught fire. "So," Mom said loudly enough for the tables nearby to hear, "tell me, how exactly are you paying for this? Did you borrow money from one of your little friends? Or maybe the grocery store finally gave you a raise?" The words landed like knives. The table grew tight, air pressing down around us. I set my spoon down gently. My voice came out calm, but laced with steel. "I didn't borrow anything. And yes, the grocery store taught me a lot, but not in the way you think." Her laugh was brittle. "Oh please. Don't act mysterious. Everyone here knows you've always been the disappointment. You can't hide it with a fancy dinner." Dad cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Maybe let's just eat." "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my tone. My hands trembled under the table, but my voice stayed steady. You've made sure for years that everyone knows what you think of me. Tonight, maybe it's time you hear what you've ignored." The table stilled. I looked at Mom directly, years of swallowed words rising to the surface. "You laughed at me for not getting into big colleges. You compared me to Sarah every chance you got. You never asked how hard I worked, how many bills I paid, how much I sacrificed. You only saw failure because you refused to see anything else." Her lips pressed tight, but she didn't interrupt. Maybe because the entire restaurant seemed to be listening now. I leaned forward. "But while you were too busy mocking me, I was learning, working, building. Every night you thought I was wasting time, I was laying down something real. You don't have to believe me. This place already does." As if on cue, the restaurant manager approached. "Miss Parker, would you like us to bring out the special wine selection for your father's birthday?" Gasps rippled across the table. Dad's eyes widened. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. Mom sputtered. "Special wine? What on earth?" The manager smiled politely. "As the owner, of course, she's entitled to it." Silence fell like a curtain. My chest rose and fell with the weight of the moment. Every insult, every dismissal, every smirk from my family seemed to dissolve into the air. Dad finally spoke, his voice low, almost reverent. "Owner?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. I've been investing, working, managing." The grocery store wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I partnered with Mr. Lopez, and together, we expanded. This restaurant is part of that expansion. And tonight, we're here not because I begged for it, but because I wanted to celebrate you, Dad. Even if you never saw me." Mom's face drained of color. You're lying. This is some kind of trick." The staff moved around us, bringing out more dishes, each one placed before me with subtle deference. The proof was undeniable. My sister muttered under her breath, "All this time." Dad sat back, his fork untouched, his expression unreadable. He looked at me differently, like he was seeing me for the first time, struggling to reconcile the daughter he'd ignored with the woman sitting before him. And then Mom snapped. "This doesn't change anything," she hissed. "So what if you own a place? You're still not." I cut her off, my voice firmer than ever. "It changes everything. Not because of the restaurant, but because I don't need your approval anymore. You can call me a disappointment all you want. But the truth is, I was never failing. You just refused to notice my success until it stood in front of you." The room was silent except for the soft clink of silverware from other tables. Eyes lingered on us, strangers witnessing a family unraveling in real time. Dad finally broke the silence. "She's right." Mom turned to him, shocked. "What?" "She's right," he repeated, his voice steadier now. "We didn't see her. We didn't listen. And that's on us." For the first time in years, I saw his gaze hold mine, not dismissive, not distracted, but full of something I'd long craved. Respect. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the moment for weakness. This was the moment I had waited for all my life, the dinner where silence ended, where truth cut sharper than any insult. The showdown wasn't just between me and my mother. It was between who I had been and who I had become. And for the first time, I wasn't losing. The air inside the restaurant felt heavy after Dad's words. "She's right," he had said, and those 3 syllables hung between us like church bells ringing in the distance. Clear, undeniable, impossible to ignore. For once, Mom had no quick retort. She sat stiff, her fork abandoned beside her plate, her lips pressed so tightly together they'd gone pale. My sister avoided eye contact, staring at the flickering candle in the center of the table as though it might swallow her whole. And me. I sat straighter than I ever had in their presence. Years of being belittled had trained me to shrink, to fold into myself, but that night, I took up space. My back didn't bend. My hands didn't fidget. The silence was no longer a punishment. It was power. The manager returned with the wine, carefully uncorking the bottle before pouring it into crystal glasses. He glanced at me. "Would you like us to bring out the birthday cake now, Miss Parker?" The words made Mom flinch again, as if every public reminder of who held authority here chipped away at the image she'd built of me as the disappointment. Yes, I said simply, my tone calm, controlled. As the staff moved to prepare the dessert, I let my eyes linger on my father. For the first time, he didn't look past me or through me. He looked at me as though he was studying someone new, someone he hadn't realized was standing in front of him all along. Why didn't you tell us? He asked quietly, almost gently. I held his gaze. Because every time I tried to share something, it was dismissed before I finished the sentence. Some things grow better in silence. This was one of them. He nodded faintly, an admission more than an agreement. The cake arrived soon after, simple chocolate with "Happy Birthday," Robert piped neatly across the top. The staff gathered around, singing softly, their smiles directed toward my father, but their respect still pointed my way. Dad blew out the candles, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I remembered as a child, the one who used to sit beside me while I practiced reading, the one who carried me on his shoulders at the fair. It wasn't gone completely, that warmth. It had just been buried under years of silence. When the plates were cleared, I stood. Dinner is on me tonight, I said, loud enough for everyone at our table to hear but not the entire room. Consider it my gift to Dad. Mom's head snapped toward me. You don't need to play the hero. We can handle a bill. The manager, almost as though he'd been waiting for this cue, placed the folded receipt neatly in front of me. Already taken care of, Miss Parker. As always. Her face flushed. My quiet revenge didn't require shouting, or gloating, or even lifting my chin higher than hers. It was in the ease with which the staff deferred to me. It was in the way her disbelief grew heavier with every passing moment. I turned back to her, my voice soft but unshakable. This isn't about money. It's about respect. Something you never thought I'd earn. But I did. And whether you acknowledge it or not doesn't change the truth. Her lips parted, then closed again. For once, the woman who always had the last word had nothing to offer. We left the restaurant not long after. The night air was cool, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. My sister walked ahead, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her face unreadable. Mom trailed behind, her heels striking hard against the sidewalk, each step sounding like an argument she couldn't quite form. Dad lingered beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed quietly, cars passing, laughter spilling from nearby bars, the ordinary soundtrack of an ordinary night. Finally, he said, I'm proud of you. The words startled me more than anything that had happened inside. I glanced at him, searching his face for sarcasm, but his expression was steady, sincere. You don't have to say that, I murmured. I know, he replied. But it's true. I should have said it a long time ago. A lump formed in my throat. I didn't cry, not there, not then, but something inside me loosened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a release of the tightness I had carried for so long. When I reached my car, Mom finally spoke. Her voice was sharp, but it wavered at the edges. Don't think one dinner makes you better than us. I opened the door slowly, then looked at her. I don't need to be better than you. I just need to be me. And for the first time, that's enough. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. She turned away, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. That was the last thing she said to me that night. I drove home with the windows cracked, the cool air rushing in, carrying away the heaviness of the evening. My phone buzzed, a text from the manager thanking me for coming in, reminding me the staff appreciated my leadership. I smiled faintly. It wasn't about proving Mom wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. Over the weeks that followed, I noticed the shift. My sister called less often, her once confident tone dimmed when she did. Mom's messages were shorter, colder, but quieter. And Dad began reaching out. Small things at first. Asking about the business. Dropping by the restaurant unannounced. Sitting in the corner booth with a cup of coffee, watching me move through the space with ease. We didn't repair years of distance overnight. But each nod of respect, each genuine question, each proud smile, it was a beginning. And for me, that was enough. My quiet revenge hadn't been the humiliation of my family. It was the simple act of living fully, without their approval hanging over me. It was the peace that came from knowing I had built something real, something that couldn't be erased by their doubts or diminished by their laughter. That night at the restaurant, I didn't win by fighting. I won by standing. By existing, unapologetically, in the very space they said I would never belong. And when I lay down to sleep later that evening, the echoes of my mother's disbelief still ringing faintly in my ears, I smiled to myself. Because the truth had finally spoken louder than her voice. The echoes of that dinner lingered in the back of my mind long after everyone had gone home, their smug laughter replaying like an unwelcome melody. But unlike before, I wasn't weighed down by shame. That night had shifted something inside me. For the first time in years, I held a quiet confidence that no snide comment, no dismissive look, could take away. Still, revenge doesn't always come in the form of grand spectacles or raised voices. Sometimes, it's in the deliberate calm after a storm, the kind of silence that unsettles those who once thrived on your pain. I didn't want to throw my success in their faces anymore. I wanted something different, something cleaner. The following week, I returned to the restaurant early in the morning before the first customers arrived. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, and the staff, who had become like family to me, greeted me with warmth. Maria, one of the senior waitresses, touched my arm lightly. "Senor, are you sure you're all right after what happened?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. I smiled. "I've never been better." Her brows knit in confusion, but she nodded, trusting me. I spent the next few hours reviewing operations, walking through the kitchen, and checking on supplies. My hands ran across the polished wooden tables, each one a piece of me. This place wasn't just a restaurant. It was proof that I had built something meaningful out of the disappointment I'd been labeled all my life. But my mind couldn't help drifting back to my family. Their faces when the staff greeted me as the owner, the shock, the disbelief, had been unforgettable. Yet, I knew them too well. The silence that followed wouldn't last. They would come back, not out of love, but because pride always loses to convenience. And I was right. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "We need to talk. Dinner again this weekend." For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then, a plan began to take shape, one not born of bitterness, but of clarity. This time, I wouldn't be walking into their arena. They'd be walking into mine. When Saturday arrived, I arranged a private table at the restaurant. The soft glow of candlelight bounced off the walls, casting a serene atmosphere. Every detail was deliberate, the menu handwritten, the wine carefully selected, the service impeccable. If they expected me to stumble back into the role of the failure son, they were in for disappointment. My parents arrived first, followed by my sister. As they sat down, I noticed how their eyes scanned the room, their expressions tight, calculating. My mother broke the silence. "This place is nice," she said, her tone caught somewhere between praise and condescension. "Thank you," I replied evenly, refusing to rise to the bait. The evening unfolded slowly, almost painfully so. They tried, in their way, to regain control of the conversation. My father asked about real work opportunities, suggesting I should think about moving on to something stable. My sister casually mentioned her new car, clearly waiting for me to express envy. But I didn't bite. Instead, I focused on enjoying the meal, speaking to the staff with kindness, laughing at Maria's jokes when she passed by. It was subtle, but I could see the discomfort growing in their eyes. For once, they weren't the center of attention, and they hated it. Midway through dinner, my mother leaned forward, her voice soft but sharp. "You know, we were surprised the other night. Shocked, actually. Why didn't you tell us this was your place?" I placed my fork down gently and met her gaze. "Because it didn't matter to you until it was something you could measure against your expectations. All my life, I've been the disappointment. Nothing I did was ever enough. So why would this have been any different?" Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. My father shifted uncomfortably, glancing away. My sister rolled her eyes but said nothing. That silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, was my quiet revenge. Not the kind that tears down, but the kind that forces reflection. The rest of the meal passed in uneasy calm. When the plates were cleared and the last sip of wine drained, I stood. "I'll have the bill sent to me. Tonight, you're just guests." They left with forced smiles, their pride bruised but intact enough to keep them from admitting it. Watching them go, I felt no gloating triumph, no burning anger. Only a profound stillness, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. That night, long after the restaurant closed, I sat in the dimly lit dining hall. The air was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. I thought about what revenge really meant. Maybe it wasn't about making them feel small. Maybe it was about no longer needing their validation at all. Over the following months, I continued to pour myself into the restaurant. I introduced new seasonal menus, organized charity events, and created scholarship opportunities for culinary students who reminded me of myself, overlooked, underestimated, but burning with passion. Each step forward stitched together parts of me I didn't even know were torn. Occasionally, my family would appear. They'd sit stiffly at a table, ordering as though they were doing me a favor by being there. And each time, I welcomed them with the same calm hospitality I offered every guest. No special treatment, no bending over backward for their approval. It was strange, how the absence of conflict unsettled them more than any argument could have. They had fed on my insecurities for years, and now, with nothing to feast on, they looked lost. One afternoon, as my mother lingered by the door after lunch, she touched my arm. "You've changed," she murmured, almost too quietly to hear. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not the towering figure of judgment from my childhood, but a woman grappling with her own disappointments. "Maybe," I said gently, "or maybe I just stopped needing to prove myself." She gave a small nod, her eyes glistening before she turned away. That was the moment I realized my revenge was complete, not because they had finally recognized me, but because I no longer needed them to. Peace had found me, not in their acceptance, but in the life I had built with my own hands. The laughter of my staff, the warmth of the customers, the soft glow of the restaurant in the evening light, this was my validation. This was my family now. And as I locked up the restaurant that night, the cool air brushing against my face, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. Quiet, unshakable, lasting peace.